Hey guys, tonight we're going on a ride, but not just any ride. You're about to wake up in a Mongol postal yurt, with felt walls, fermented milk on your breath, and absolutely zero cell reception. And in case you're wondering, yes, there are horses outside. And no, you don't get to sleep in. Someone needs a message delivered 500 miles away by sundown. Lucky you. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, tell me in the comments where you're watching from, and what time it is over there. I'm always curious how far these stories travel. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wake up to the sound of hooves. Not thunderous, dramatic battle hooves. No. These are more rhythmic, like someone's tapping out a travel itinerary with a horse instead of a pen. You stretch. Your back's a little stiff from the felt mat, and your nose is full of campfire smoke and sheep. You blink and take in your surroundings. You're inside a yurt. Not just any yurt. A postal yurt. The kind of place that doesn't just provide shelter, it moves messages. Important ones. The kind that decide whether someone keeps their throne or loses their head. The space is compact but surprisingly efficient. Around you are satchels full of scrolls, bundles of dried food, saddle gear, and one particularly smug-looking dog asleep on a pile of boots. Through the flap of the door, you see early morning mist rising off the steppe. And horses. Lots of horses. You step outside into the crisp Mongolian morning. A courier is already prepping his mount, checking the girth strap, brushing the mane, mumbling to it like they've had a long-term but slightly toxic friendship. He nods at you. You're the new one. You don't answer. You're too busy trying to remember which direction is east. Not that it matters, because the postal system you're standing in, it runs in every direction. This is the yam. No, not the vegetable. The Mongol Postal Network. A vast chain of stations, like the one you're in now, scattered roughly every 25 to 30 miles across the empire. Each one stocked with fresh horses, supplies, riders, food, and yes, gossip. You're in one of Genghis Khan's greatest inventions. The Mongol Empire wasn't just about conquering, it was about connecting. And they didn't just build roads. They built rhythms. Message rhythms. Logistics rhythms. Entire empires ran smoother because one guy with a horse and a scroll didn't stop until he'd crossed rivers, deserts, and occasionally, terrifying wolf packs. Inside your yurt, a steward hands you a piece of hardened cheese the size of a rock. Breakfast, she says. You nod politely, then quietly put it in your pocket for later. Maybe much later. You ask how many riders pass through here daily. Dozens, she says. Sometimes more. Depends who's at war. Classic answer. You sit on a short wooden stool and sip something warm from a leather cup. It tastes like someone fermented a cloud and then dared you to enjoy it. It's invigorating. Above you, the sky stretches endlessly, and beyond the yurt cluster, you can just barely make out another station on the distant horizon. Someone will leave this morning with a scroll meant for a governor. Another will carry a message to a distant outpost. You're just trying to remember which end of the saddle goes forward. But even as you fumble with straps and wipe breakfast off your chin, one thing becomes very clear. This place moves. And if you're lucky, you'll learn how to move with it. You're gripping the saddle with knees that are already protesting, and you've barely left the station. The courier riding next to you laughs, kindly, but definitely with a hint of, you're not going to make it to lunch. He's already shifting effortlessly in his seat, like the horse is just an extension of his spine. You, on the other hand, are realizing that the saddle is not padded, the wind is aggressive, and Mongol horses have exactly zero sympathy. Welcome to the Empire. Because today, you're about to learn how the Mongols built something bigger, faster, and more quietly impressive than any army, an empire that rode like the wind. You glance behind you. The yurt is already a tiny dot, swallowed by the landscape. Ahead of you, endless golden grasslands, flat horizons, and the faint outline of another station on the edge of sight. This is not your average postal system. This is the YAM, a state-run communication network covering over 200,000 miles of territory, from the forests of Russia to the rice paddies of China, and as far as the Middle East. No stamps. No GPS. Just horses, riders, and yurts with a schedule stricter than your high school math teacher. At the center of it all, Genghis Khan. Yes, that Genghis. Warrior. Strategist. Yurt enthusiast. He didn't just want to conquer cities. He wanted to connect them. Because what good is ruling an empire if you can't find out what's happening across it until 3 months too late? So he created this network. Relay stations were built across key routes, each stocked with fresh horses, food, and shelter. Couriers carried tokens called pesa, essentially VIP passes that let them demand supplies, shelter, and priority treatment from anyone, anywhere, anytime. You turn to your fellow rider and ask how far he goes in a day. About 200 miles, he shrugs. More if the wind behaves. You blink. That's roughly 8 marathons. On horseback. Daily. He shrugs again. The horses do most of the work. Right. And it's not just that they can do it. It's that they do it consistently. Mongol couriers were trained for this life from childhood. Some of them could sleep while riding. Others could spot a distant station from miles away by watching how the smoke rose from cooking fires. It was instinct. It was blood-deep skill. And get this, they even had message pouches sewn into their sleeves, just in case they were captured. Messages written in secret scripts, protected with oil or wax to withstand storms, snow, and sweaty underarms. Historians still argue about whether the system was truly centralized or more of a regional relay structure. But no one denies its effectiveness. Marco Polo wrote about it in awe. Chinese scribes praised its speed. And even enemy spies grudgingly admitted it was the logistical backbone of Mongol dominance. You adjust your grip on the reins. The horse snorts, unimpressed. Wind rushes over the steppe like a giant breath, and for a moment, you catch it, the rhythm, the forward motion. The strange feeling that you're not just traveling through an empire. You're part of the very thing that keeps it alive. One hoofbeat at a time. You're sitting cross-legged now in the shadow of a felt tent, boots off, steam rising from a bowl of something that smells vaguely like mutton and ambition. Across from you sits the station master, a woman with sun-leathered cheeks and a laugh like dry grass. She's telling you about the time a message went from Karakoram to Samarkand in 8 days. You nearly choke on your stew. Tonight, you're learning how a brilliant, dusty little idea became a machine that stitched continents together. The birth of the YAM system. It started, as many Mongol things do, with Genghis Khan. He wasn't content being the most feared man on horseback. He wanted a functioning state. And that meant information. Not just gossip or glory, but logistics. How many troops? How much grain? Where are the borders leaking? To solve this, he did something both terrifyingly simple and revolutionary. He made a map of movement. The YAM, or örtöö, if you want to be fancy in Mongolian, was born. A relay system of thousands of stations, each spaced about 25 to 30 miles apart. Why that number? Because that's about how far a Mongol horse can gallop before demanding a snack and a nap. Each station had 3 key ingredients. 1. Fresh horses. 2. Shelter, yurts, tents, or huts. 3. A person who knew exactly what was coming, and when. You didn't just show up. Riders were expected. Scheduled. Known. Some even say birds were used to signal ahead, though historians are still arguing about that one. What made it work? Trust. Not in the moral sense, this is an empire we're talking about, but in functionality. The stations weren't optional. They were law. If you blocked a courier, delayed a message, or misplaced a horse, you could be fined, punished, or, well, relocated permanently to the afterlife. And yet, for all its discipline, the YAM was surprisingly flexible. Need to reroute around a flood? There's a backup trail. Need to avoid a skirmish? A scout yurt will warn you. Need to send 3 messages in different directions? The system will handle it. Your host ladles more stew into your bowl and explains how her grandmother ran this very station during the time of Ogdi Khan. Riders would arrive day and night, sometimes freezing, sometimes bleeding, always hungry. You feed them first, she says. Then you ask questions. You nod solemnly and immediately burn your tongue on the stew. By the 13th century, the network stretched across nearly the entire Eurasian continent. Over 1,400 stations by some estimates. Messages could travel 1,000 miles in under a week. In comparison, medieval European messengers were still tripping over their cloaks and asking for directions. Some scholars call it the first true information superhighway. Others liken it to a physical internet, nodes, relays, packets of information, all built on top of horse hooves and human tenacity. You finish your stew, now slightly smarter and slightly sweatier, and glance around. Scrolls hang near the door. Saddles lean against a post. A fresh horse stomps outside, impatient for its turn. This is no ordinary tent. It's a nerve center. And you're beginning to understand. Empires weren't held together by swords. They were held together by well-fed horses and people who knew when to pass the message. You duck your head and step into the yurt again, though really, it feels more like stepping into a mobile post office crossed with someone's living room and a minor military installation. Because tonight, you're about to take a closer look at what's inside a postal yurt, and let me tell you, it's not just hay and saddles. The first thing that hits you is the warmth. Not cozy cabin warmth. Horse-powered, sweat mixed with milk and firewood warmth. The kind that sticks to your clothes and clings to your eyebrows. A small stove sits at the center, its smoke slipping quietly through the circular hole in the roof. Next to it, a stack of hardened cheese bricks and a bowl of horse-fat dumplings. Yes, you're offered one. Yes, you eat it. Yes, it's chewy. But more interesting is everything else. Scrolls. Sealed with wax. Bundled in color-coded strings. Some written in Mongolian script, others in Chinese, Persian, even Latin. The postal yurt isn't just for Mongol command, it's a language blender, humming 24/7 with news from all over the empire. Near the scroll sits a saddlebag full of coins, meticulously organized, used to pay for supplies, bribe minor warlords, or settle bets about how many goats it takes to intimidate a bandit. On the opposite wall, a simple map scratched into leather. It's not to scale. Doesn't need to be. It shows the flow, what station is ahead, where the fresh horses are kept, which route to avoid during spring floods, and one ominous red X that just says, bandits, angry. Your host shows you the pesa, the imperial tablet carried by messengers. This one's made of silver, stamped with the Khan's seal. If you're holding one of these, everyone, from local herders to provincial governors, must help you. Give you a horse. Feed you. Open their doors. It's like being a mailman, diplomat, and minor rock star all at once. Of course, with great power comes great, sleeping in a felt tent with goats. So it's not glamorous, exactly. But it works. Everything in the yurt is designed for efficiency. A corner holds spare boots, dried herbs, mostly medicinal, some suspiciously recreational, bundles of wool, and a tiny wooden flute, because apparently, postal riders get bored too. There's even a logbook, written with charcoal on birch bark sheets, recording who passed through, what they carried, what time they arrived, and whether they smelled like usual. Historians are still debating just how standardized these yurts were. Some say they varied wildly, adapting to local terrain and culture. Others argue there was a pretty tight template, at least during the height of Mongol administration. Either way, this one? It's busy, efficient, alive. Every corner hums with stories, messages about troop movements, grain shortages, birth announcements, border skirmishes, stolen sheep, peace treaties, secret warnings, and, occasionally, very polite threats. You look around, feeling strangely honored to be in this space. Because it's not a palace. Not a temple. Not a battlefield. But here, inside these thick felt walls, empires move. You sit near the stove, the smoke curling upward, the walls fluttering slightly in the wind. Somewhere outside, a new rider is approaching. A fresh message. Another handoff in a system that never sleeps. And as you sip a warm, slightly alarming drink made from fermented mare's milk, you think, this yurt doesn't look like history, but it feels like the center of the world. Your boots are laced. Your horse is impatient. And your stomach has just realized that maybe drinking fermented mare's milk before galloping at full speed wasn't the wisest choice. But there's no turning back now. Because tonight, you're shadowing a relay rider, the closest thing the 13th century had to a cross between a marathon runner, a stuntman, and express delivery with absolutely no chill. Your companion is already mounted, leaning forward, hands light on the reins, face unreadable in that very, I've done this 1,000 times way. You, meanwhile, are trying to remember which pocket your emergency cheese is in. The station master gives a nod, and just like that, you're off. The wind hits your face like a slap with a cold rabbit pelt. Your horse thunders forward, and the grass becomes a blur. You grip tight and try to think of something poetic like, I am one with the steppe, but mostly, you're just trying not to fall off. Relay riding is intense. It's not just fast. It's precise. Each rider knows their exact leg of the journey, usually around 25 to 30 miles. They have a tight window to deliver the message, change horses, and head off again. No time to dawdle, no bathroom breaks, and definitely no Instagram posts. After about an hour, you skid to a halt at the next station. Your partner dismounts mid-stride, passes the message pouch to the waiting rider, who's already swinging onto a fresh horse. Within 30 seconds, they're gone. No applause. No dramatics. Just efficiency. You gasp for air and collapse next to a water trough. Your guide hands you a piece of dried meat. That was the slow part, she says. Great. You watch as station staff check tack, rub down the used horses, and restock the pouch supply. One young girl checks the scrolls for damage. Another feeds the hawk perched beside the door. Yes, some routes use birds for backup messaging in particularly rough terrain. Though, let's be honest, the birds are kind of smug about it. You're told that the best relay riders, known as örtöö, could cover 250 miles in a single day. On multiple horses. Across mountains, rivers, blizzards, and occasionally the odd angry goat herd. They memorized every dip in the land. Knew how to read clouds. Could spot danger long before it arrived. Some even carried multiple languages in their heads so they could relay verbal reports if needed. Historians still marvel at the system's speed. One Persian observer said it surpassed all other kingdoms. A Chinese official tried to replicate it and promptly ran out of horses and patience. But the Mongols? They had it down to an art. And you, right now, are starting to understand why. Because it's not just about being fast. It's about being part of something faster than you. A relay of trust, of rhythm, of dust and hooves and scrolls that matter more than the rider who carries them. You're not the hero of the story. You're the messenger. And honestly, that feels kind of epic. You're standing in a field full of horses, and none of them want anything to do with you. One turns its back. Another yawns in your face. A third gives you the kind of side I usually reserved for people who can't saddle up without help. Which, let's be honest, is currently you. Because tonight, you're learning what makes these creatures the unsung engines of empire. The Mongol postal horses that knew the route, the rhythm, and, somehow, your level of inexperience. Your guide claps you on the shoulder and hands you a rope. Pick the calmest one, she says. There is no calm one. Eventually, you settle on a stocky, short-legged horse with a face like it's seen things and absolutely doesn't care. It's not much taller than a large dog, but apparently, it can gallop for hours without tiring. This is the classic Mongol steppe horse, tough, smart, and about as dramatic as a rock. And here's the kicker, it doesn't need you to guide it. You mount up, with minimal grace, and your guide just points. The horse begins trotting before you even touch the reins. Why? Because it knows the route. These horses are trained not to rely on humans for directions. They follow trails, station markers, even the scent of other riders. Some couriers even claim the horses could sense urgency, picking up speed when a message was more important. Others say they recognized specific yurt clusters from miles away. Historians remain split on whether this is real training or exaggerated legend. But when your horse swerves around a ditch you definitely didn't see, you start leaning toward legend. You learn a few key things. These horses graze as they go. No need for sacks of grain or midday feeding stops. They're resistant to cold, capable of traveling in snowstorms without blankets. And best of all, they're rotated at every station. So while you're exhausted, the next horse? Fresh as morning dew and twice as smug. You pass a group of resting riders. One leans back on his saddle and calls out, "Treat the horse better than yourself. It's worth more." You believe him. Because if the postal rider is the nerve, the yurt is the muscle, then the horse? The horse is the heartbeat. Without it, nothing moves. Nothing reaches the border. Nothing returns home. You dismount, finally, legs shaking slightly. Your horse snorts and immediately starts chewing on a bush. No thank you. No goodbye. Just mission complete. You pat its side anyway. Because somewhere between the cold wind, the dust in your teeth, and the 12 miles you just bounced across without a suspension system, you started to get it. These horses weren't pets. They were partners. Tough, quiet, unimpressed by humans, but loyal to the road. And in a world built on distance, that made them priceless. You're sitting cross-legged by the fire now, picking at your dinner and eavesdropping like it's your full-time job. The yurt is full tonight. 3 riders, 2 station hands, 1 very curious goat, and a handful of scrolls wrapped in leather that no one is allowed to touch except the rider who brought them. Someone laughs. Someone snores. Someone is quietly polishing a metal tag hanging from a thick cord around their neck. Your guide leans over and whispers, "That's a pesa. Don't ask to hold it unless you want to walk home." Because tonight, you're learning about seals, sashes, and secret tokens, the items that turned ordinary messengers into untouchable agents of the Khan. The pesa is small, metal, slightly curved, engraved with flowing Mongolian script and a symbol of authority. It looks like jewelry. It's not. It's a passport, badge, and fast-track access card all in one. When Genghis Khan created the postal system, he knew it needed more than just roads and horses. It needed respect. A courier couldn't deliver sensitive messages if every gatekeeper, governor, and grumpy border guard demanded a bribe or a reason. So the Khan issued pesa tablets, carried by trusted riders, nobles, and officials. If you had one, you had the Khan's personal backing. People had to feed you, house you, give you a horse, and definitely not stab you. That last one wasn't always followed, but the punishment was memorable. Different metals meant different levels of power. A gold, imperial, top tier, the Khan's own messengers. A silver, high-ranking officials and elite couriers. A copper or wood, lower-level agents or regional passes. Some were engraved with terrifying phrases like, "By the power of eternal heaven." Others just had the message equivalent of, "Please help this person, or else." Your guide pulls out a faded sash, deep red, fraying at the ends. "This belonged to my grandmother," she says. "She ran 5 stations. Never missed a message. Never lost a horse. And she always wore this." The sash marked her status. Not flashy, but known. Riders recognized the color and knew she was someone you didn't mess with, unless you wanted to find yourself rerouted to Siberia on accident. You also learn about message pouches, often worn under tunics or tied close to the chest. Many were waterproofed with beeswax, sometimes even stitched into the lining of clothes to avoid theft or rain damage. And sometimes, riders carried false scrolls, decoys, meant to throw off bandits or spies. The real message? Hidden in code, tucked in a boot, or whispered at a station only the intended recipient knew about. Historians today still debate whether the Pesa system was standardized or improvised. Did each Khan issue his own versions? Did some forge them? Were there secret versions never recorded in any archive? Probably yes to all. You finish your stew, the fire burning low, the yurt quieting. Outside, wind brushes the felt like soft fingers. You look across at the silver Pesa again, catching the firelight. It's not just metal. It's momentum. It's what let a message ride from Korea to Hungary without ever stopping. It's what gave one rider the power of an empire behind his horse. You lie back, Pesa glinting in your thoughts. And somewhere in your sleep, you dream of metal tags that open doors no one else can even find. You wake up to the smell of something. Smoky. Not fire. Not danger. Just food that's probably 80% protein and 20% guesswork. Your stomach growls before your eyes are even open. Today's lesson? Your diving mouth first into the diet that kept couriers alive across deserts, mountains, and occasionally blizzards. The snacks for speed demons. You stumble outside the yurt and spot your guide squatting by the fire, flipping something on a flat stone. It's round, slightly charred, and smells amazing. She grins. Breakfast. Cheese pancake. Kind of. You're not sure what the kind of means, but you sit down and accept the offering like a warrior who hasn't eaten since sunrise, which, to be fair, you haven't. Here's what you learn as you chew, slowly, carefully, and with respect. Mongol courier food isn't fancy, but it works. The core ingredients are a dried meat, mutton or horse. Yes, horse, don't look so scandalized. A hard cheese called örtöö, which could survive anything except maybe being chewed too quickly. A fermented mare's milk, arag, which is both a drink and a personality test. A fat cakes made from flour and animal grease, often stuffed in saddlebags for days. Your guide shows you a rider's ration pouch. It looks like it's been through 7 wars and one very confused goat. Inside, you find a dried curds, or a few lumps of sugar, a real luxury. A 2 pickled garlic cloves. A mysterious ball that turns out to be compressed yogurt. Don't chew, she warns as you reach for it. Just suck on it. Or cry. You follow instructions. And here's the thing, this food? It's not just for fuel. It's for function. It's lightweight, doesn't spoil, and gives riders the energy to go fast, hard, and long. In fact, some scholars believe Mongol couriers had better endurance than many soldiers, because they ate consistently, hydrated with milk instead of water, and adapted their metabolism to function under constant motion. There's even a story, still debated, about riders slitting a vein in their horse's neck and drinking just enough blood to keep going until the next station. A practice that, while horrifying to your modern brain, was considered practical, respectful, and not at all uncommon. You chew thoughtfully on your now slightly less alarming cheesecake. So, you ask, no fruits. Your guide raises an eyebrow. You see any orchards? Fair point. The conversation shifts to rituals. Some riders bless their food before every ride. Others never eat garlic on westbound routes. Bad luck, apparently. And everyone seems to agree that spilling milk is the spiritual equivalent of inviting the gods to judge your posture. As you pack up for the next stretch of the journey, your guide hands you a soft pouch tied with wool string. Emergency snack. Don't open it unless you're lost or very, very sad. You nod solemnly. Inside, 1 dried plum, 2 sugar lumps, and a slice of mystery fat. Comfort food, Mongol style. And as you climb into the saddle again, stomach warm and fingers sticky with dried yogurt dust, you realize something. They didn't just build an empire on messages. They built it on cheese, fat, and whatever would still taste okay after 3 days in a saddlebag. Honestly, kind of genius. You're bouncing in the saddle again, except this time, you're not upright. You're hunched forward, arms draped over the horse's neck, eyes squinting against the wind like someone trying to read fine print during an earthquake. Your guide, effortlessly upright beside you, calls out with a grin. Don't fight it. Let the horse do the thinking. You're just the luggage. Tonight, you're learning the least glamorous, most essential part of a courier's life. Sleeping with your saddle. Not beside it. Not near it. With it. You're halfway through a long-distance run, 2 stations behind, 3 more to go, and your body is done. But the message pouch strapped to your chest doesn't care if you're tired. It's urgent, and the yam doesn't have a snooze button. So, you do what every courier learns to do by necessity. You nap on the move. It starts small. You loosen your grip. You lean forward. The horse knows the route, and the rhythm starts to lull you. One hoofbeat after another. It's like a lullaby with muscles. Your guide shows you how to loop the reins around your wrist just tight enough to hold, but loose enough not to yank the horse if you spasm mid-dream. She also shows you how to wedge your foot into the stirrup, just wrong enough to keep from tipping sideways. And then, you doze. Not for hours, just moments. Like blinking slowly. Or watching a cloud drift and waking up 10 gallops later. Some veteran couriers could sleep for 15 minutes at a time, several times an hour, riding through the night like ghosts with bad posture. Others trained themselves to wake at the first shift in terrain. One even claimed he could sense when the message got lighter, as if the news had been delivered before he even arrived. Historians are skeptical of that one, but not about the napping. There are detailed accounts, mostly from outsiders, marveling at how Mongol couriers could ride for days with minimal rest. How? Because they didn't wait for comfort. They slept in motion. A saddle under their stomach. A pouch on their chest. The stars above, and hoofbeats below. Your horse hits a patch of uneven ground, and you jolt awake, breath catching. Your guide chuckles. That's your alarm clock. You pass a dry creek bed and spot a half-buried yurt foundation, long abandoned, probably an old relay station from decades ago. It reminds you that this system has lived longer than most cities. A network of dirt, muscle, and memory. You yawn. Your guide hands you a strip of dried meat and a strong side eye. No sleeping if you're chewing. You eat. Slowly. Because tonight, you're learning what real stamina looks like. It's not being wide awake. It's moving anyway. And trusting the road, even while your eyes close. You're standing at the edge of a map so wide it doesn't fit in your head. To the east, the echo of Chinese gongs. To the west, Persian poetry floating over domes. And right now, you're holding a scroll that has to make it from somewhere near Beijing, all the way to Baghdad. No pressure. Tonight, you're riding along with a message that will cross a continent, a 1,000-mile journey powered by hooves, fire pits, and human memory. Your guide shows you the scroll first. It's wrapped in oilcloth, tied with dyed thread, and sealed with wax marked by the Khan's crest. You don't know what it says, of course. You're not supposed to. But you do know it matters. Because this message is getting the 5-horse treatment. That's right, some dispatches were considered so vital they were accompanied by a team of 5 riders, spaced apart in sequence to maximize speed. When one passed a station, another picked up the message. No rests. No delays. The relay starts at dawn. The first rider gallops off into the blue haze of early morning, scroll tucked under one arm like it's a newborn. Within 3 hours, he's handed it to the next courier. Fresh horse, fresh legs, same intensity. And so it continues. You travel with the scroll across grasslands, deserts, and rivers. Each station is different, some with well-maintained yurts and hot broth, others with only a tarp, a tired dog, and a suspicious goat. The scroll moves through. A thunderstorm. A small border skirmish, solved with a clever bribe and some dried plums. An area known for bandits, where the courier literally swaps horses mid-run. Everywhere it goes, the message is recognized. Not because anyone reads it, but because the seal commands respect. This is the power of the yam. It's not just speed. It's reliability. Even today, historians marvel at how a message could make that journey in under 2 weeks. Most empires of the time took months to move information across that distance, if they managed it at all. And the content of the messages? It could be anything. Orders from the Khan, military updates, trade negotiations, even marriage proposals. Yes, really. There's a Persian story about a Mongol bride who received her wedding scroll faster than her dowry arrived. The marriage still went ahead. So did the scroll. You reach the last station before the scroll enters Persian territory. The final courier mounts a horse already breathing like it knows what's at stake. He tucks the scroll into a pouch lined with lambskin and takes off. You don't follow him this time. You just stand at the edge of the road and feel the wind. Because that message? It just flew across half the world. And you were there to see how. Not with airplanes. Not with satellites. Just hooves, dust, and trust. The yurt tonight is unusually noisy. Not loud, exactly, just alive. Someone's sharpening a blade near the fire. A rider in the corner is mumbling to himself, pacing, clearly waiting for a scroll. Another is loudly retelling a story you're 90% sure didn't happen the way he says it did. But the words catch your ear anyway. Because tonight, you're not just following a message. You're chasing gossip that changed empires. It's easy to think of the yam as just a mail service. Scroll in, scroll out. Done. But messages have layers. And sometimes, what travels fastest isn't written at all. You're sipping something warm and mysterious when your guide leans in and says, "The real couriers? They carry 2 things, scrolls and stories." And that's when you realize. Even unofficial words moved along the relay lines. A courier rides into a station with news. Say, a prince in Samarkand was just deposed. Maybe it's true. Maybe it's not. But he tells the station master, who tells a rider heading the other way, who shares it with a merchant, who then spreads it in a market 300 miles away. By the time the official scroll shows up to confirm or deny it, everyone's already made up their minds. This is the unwritten network. One message changes a trade deal. Another shifts the morale of a garrison. Rumors reach courts before ambassadors do. Kings make decisions based on whispers carried by riders who just heard it at the last yurt. You learn about one legendary case. A false rumor spread that a certain Mongol general had died. The news raced ahead of the army, so quickly that when he showed up alive, the enemy city surrendered, thinking they were being haunted. No sword was drawn. Just gossip. On horseback. Historians still argue over whether this was an accident or a psychological tactic. You suspect both. Some say station masters were the real information brokers. They logged more than just scrolls. They kept mental ledgers of who passed through, what they looked like, what they whispered. In some regions, a well-informed station master could be more powerful than a minor noble. And it wasn't just military or political gossip. You overhear tonight. The harvest failed in the northern valleys. The Khan's cousin married someone he wasn't supposed to. There's a new kind of soup in Bokhara. All of it matters. Because all of it moves. You help a rider repack his saddlebag. He shows you a hidden pocket. Inside, a small carving of a falcon and a folded scrap of fabric. "What's that for?" you ask. He smiles. "Just a message. Not for writing." You don't ask further. Because in the Mongol Empire, sometimes the most powerful messages had no ink. Just speed, memory, and timing. You lie back that night, head buzzing with stories half confirmed, half imagined. Outside, another rider passes by, hooves soft in the grass, gone before you can sit up. And you wonder, did he carry a scroll? Or something even louder? You're ankle deep in slush, clutching the reins of a horse that clearly disapproves of the weather, and of you. Your cloak is soaked, your eyebrows are icy, and your teeth are halfway into a negotiation about whether or not to stay inside your mouth. Welcome to the less glamorous chapter of the Mongol Postal Network. Tonight, you're facing the ultimate courier challenge. Weather, wolves, and other delays. Let's start with the snow. It's horizontal. You're somewhere in the Altai Mountains, and the sky has been spitting ice darts at you since dawn. The visibility is so bad that the only reason you know you're still on the trail is because your horse hasn't stopped yet. Your guide, riding ahead, turns and yells over the wind, "If you fall off, tuck and roll." Reassuring. Despite this charming scenery, the yam didn't pause for bad weather. Messages had to go out. Always. The entire system was designed for reliability, not convenience. You arrive at the next station, more frozen boot than human, and are greeted by two things. 1. A warm yurt with steam curling from the roof. 2. A rider nursing claw marks across his saddlebag. Wolves. Apparently, the last leg of the journey crossed a patch of woods currently home to a pack of very territorial wildlife. The rider shrugs. They mostly go for the meat rations. Unless you are the meat. Comforting. And it's not just wolves. You hear stories of flash floods in spring turning canals into dangerous detours. Summer heat making horses collapse mid-run. Dust storms so thick that couriers rode blind for miles. Earthquakes swallowing whole relay huts, rare but dramatic. Despite all that, most messages still arrived. Why? Because the system had backups. Alternate routes. Spare horses. Emergency shelters carved into hillsides. Seasonal wayfinding methods using stars, moss patterns, and even bird migrations. You help tend to a limping horse whose hoof got stuck in ice. The station master applies a heated poultice, muttering gently in Mongolian. The horse leans into it like a tired coworker finally getting their coffee. Your guide tells you about riders who trained with falcons, who could spot trouble from the sky. Others traveled in pairs for the more dangerous runs, taking turns sleeping while the other scanned the landscape for, well, everything. One time, a courier delayed by a river flood swam across with a message in his mouth. He couldn't talk for a day, but the scroll was dry. You ask if any rider ever just gave up. Your guide snorts. Sure. Once. He's still somewhere east of Lake Baikal, building yurts for a living. Harsh. But the truth is, the yam wasn't built for fair weather. It was built for resilience. Riders knew they might face wolves, storms, exhaustion, or getting stuck in a snowdrift with only frozen cheese and blind optimism. But they rode anyway. Because the message mattered. Because someone was waiting on the other end. Because the Empire expected motion, even through chaos. You warm your hands by the fire that night, listening to the wind scrape across the yurt. And even though your boots are still soggy and your fingers barely function, you realize something. This was never a system of perfect days. It was a system of unstoppable days. You're sitting in a yurt with 4 people, 3 teacups, and 1 very large ledger. The fire crackles. The air smells faintly of ink, wool, and logic. Across from you, the station master is flipping through a worn scroll filled with checkmarks, annotations, and, oddly, a doodle of a very unimpressed sheep. This, she says, is how we keep an empire from falling over. Tonight, you're uncovering the part of the Mongol postal system no one talks about at parties. The quiet power of logistics. Forget galloping messengers and dramatic mountains for a second. The yam's real brilliance? It worked. All the time. And that required planning, inventory, routine, and ruthless organization. You learn that each station, whether in the cold highlands or low desert plains, kept records of which riders passed through and when, what they carried, letters, goods, suspiciously well-fed pigeons, how many horses were used, rested, replaced, which supplies were running low, mostly cheese, always cheese. Your guide points out a square box on the scroll. That, she says, means a courier complained about the stew. You stare. There's more than one of those boxes. But behind the humor lies something crucial. Every station was accountable. If a message didn't arrive, there was a trail to follow. If a horse went missing, someone signed for it. If a fire broke out, recorded. If a goat ate someone's scroll, you guessed it, goat cited by name. And it wasn't just pen and paper logistics. The entire yam functioned through timing. Riders had expected arrival windows. Horses rotated in tight cycles. Station masters communicated via coded signals. Smoke, flags, even rider posture from a distance could signal delay or danger. You're handed a wax tablet, used to draft quick notes during rush runs. It's heavier than you expect and slightly warm, probably from being tucked inside someone's coat. Then you're shown a schedule. Yes, a schedule. Riders on major routes operated on rotating shifts. Morning crews, night crews, emergency runners. There were even designated storm riders, couriers trained for the worst conditions and known for their terrifying punctuality. You sip some tea, it's warm, and ask, so who decided where all the stations went? The answer? A combination of strategic mapping, every 25 to 30 miles. Terrain logic, avoiding steep climbs and wolf dens, ideally. And existing tribal knowledge, routes known long before the empire rose. Historians often focus on Mongol conquests, but behind every battlefield was a message that got there first. Troop deployments, delivered by courier. Grain shortages, relayed in days. Enemy movements, spotted and reported before the dust even settled. Some scholars argue the yam was the glue of the Mongol Empire, binding together an otherwise impossibly large territory. Others say it was more than glue. It was the bloodstream. Because what is an empire if it can't communicate with itself? Your guide sets the scroll down. Power, she says, isn't always loud. Sometimes it's just showing up on time. You nod slowly. Outside, a fresh rider arrives. No ceremony, no shouting. Just the low thud of hooves and a handoff so smooth you almost miss it. The message is gone again. And the world keeps turning. Tonight, you're not riding. You're reading. Not a book. Not a scroll. But a moment. You're crouched beside a small fire in a quiet corner of the station, holding something precious in your hands. A single sheet of paper. It's creased, sealed, and surprisingly heavy with meaning. Because tonight, you're learning how sometimes, paper was more dangerous than arrows. Your guide joins you, watching the flame flicker in your eyes. She doesn't speak for a while. Then, almost casually, she says, "That one got a man executed before it even finished drying." You blink. She shrugs. Wrong word. Wrong seal. Right reader. Welcome to the razor-thin line between message and mayhem. In the Mongol Empire, a scroll wasn't just a piece of parchment. It was a weapon, a declaration, a law, a rumor that had backing. It could elevate a local chief to governor, demote a general to goat duty, or trigger the movement of 10,000 troops by the time it was unfolded. And the danger was in the delivery. Some messages were written in code. Others were cloaked in ritual phrases so complex that only 2 people alive understood their full weight. Even the materials mattered. A scroll on silk? Probably diplomatic. One on rough birch bark? Military. One stitched into clothing? Probably secret. Definitely risky. You're shown one with a broken seal. A courier dropped it. A guard opened it. 3 days later, a different courier delivered a different message. That guard. Never seen again. Your guide hands you a piece of charcoal and an old scrap to practice with. You copy the characters slowly. The ink smudges. The curves wobble. She doesn't laugh. She just says, "Don't rush. That's how empires fall." You glance up. She's not joking. There's a story about a rider who was given 2 messages. One for a provincial lord. One for the Khan's cousin. He mixed them up. The lord thought he'd been granted more land and raised an army. The cousin thought he'd been demoted and stopped sending taxes. 3 months of chaos. All from one little switch. Historians still aren't sure if it was accidental or sabotage. Your guide swears it was definitely just bad handwriting. It's a strange realization, how something so small, so light, could carry such massive weight. In this world, a scroll could start a war, end a dynasty, save a city, doom a friend, and the person carrying it often didn't know, just rode through rain, wolves, and time itself. You watch the fire crackle around the edges of the discarded paper. You wonder how many lives changed from just one sentence, one signature, one messenger riding a little too fast or not fast enough. Then you fold your own practice sheet, seal it clumsily with wax, and hold it up. It's nothing. It's everything. Depends who reads it. You're stirring a pot. It smells like onions, milk, and something gently burning. Outside the yurt, hooves clop softly past, and children are chasing each other around a pile of saddles. But in here, it's warm, steamy, a little chaotic. Tonight, you're not riding. You're hosting. Because you're meeting the women behind the network, the ones who fed the riders, repaired the yurts, ran the stations, raised the horses, and somehow did it all while holding a baby and dodging goats. Your guide's older sister is slicing dried roots with a curved knife that looks older than you. Her daughter is refilling water skins. A cousin mends a torn saddlebag using sinew thread and a needle carved from bone. You ask who runs the station. They all look at the grandmother in the corner, sipping tea like a queen. She doesn't say much. She doesn't have to. In many parts of the Mongol postal system, the station masters weren't men in armor. They were matriarchs in felt robes. Women, especially older ones, kept the entire operation alive. When male riders were gone for weeks, it was the women who managed inventory, tracked rider schedules, fed every soul who walked through the door, and, occasionally, served as emergency couriers themselves. Your guide tells you of her great aunt, who once wrote a message through a mountain storm because every man in the station was stuck in the latrine with fermented milk poisoning. Fastest delivery that week, she grins. You're handed a bowl of something hot and hearty. It's delicious. You ask for the name. She shrugs. It doesn't have one. It just works. And that's kind of the theme of the whole evening. Everything here just works, because the women make it work. They don't shout. They don't march. But they know where every saddle is, how long each horse can run, and which rider tends to leave scrolls under his pillow. Historians often skip over this part. The books talk about generals, khans, and logistics. But ask anyone who actually ran a station, and you'll hear the same thing. Without the women, the road breaks. You help dry a scroll by the fire, careful not to smudge the ink. Your hands smell like broth and leather. Outside, a rider calls for fresh water. A girl no older than 12 hands it over, then goes right back to braiding a harness. She'll be running this place in 5 years, your guide says. You believe her, because what you've learned tonight is simple and huge. Yes, the riders were fast. Yes, the horses were strong. Yes, the messages were powerful. But the heartbeat of the yam? It was here, in the kitchens, at the fire pits, in the soft call of a mother waking a rider at dawn, scroll in one hand, breakfast in the other. Empires may rise with conquest, but they're sustained by care. The sun is barely above the horizon when you hear the call, "We're moving." You blink, disoriented. Weren't you just asleep? You're pretty sure you were asleep. Someone throws you a roll of felt. Someone else points at a pile of saddlebags that, surprise, are now your problem. Today's not about messages. It's about mobility. Because tonight, you're learning how to relocate an entire postal yurt, and trust me, this isn't your average camping trip. First thing to understand, a Mongol postal station isn't a building. It's an idea. It's wherever it needs to be. And when the terrain shifts or politics shift, or the horses say absolutely not to a floodplain, you pack up and go. You're handed a mallet made from antler. Someone gestures at the yurt's wall lashing. Start here. Before you've rubbed the sleep from your eyes, the felt roof is off. The frame folds like it's done this 1,000 times, because it has, and everything you thought was permanent is now a neat bundle being strapped to a cart pulled by extremely opinionated oxen. Within an hour, the yurt is gone. In its place, just hoofprints, flattened grass, and maybe a forgotten spoon. Your guide claps you on the back. Now we follow the road east. You walk beside the group. Riders, station staff, horses, dogs, chickens, yes, even the goat that keeps chewing on saddle straps. It's a traveling village, wrapped in dust and resolve. Why move a whole postal station? Sometimes it's strategy, closer to a new trade route or military post. Sometimes it's necessity, bad weather, flooding, a land dispute. And sometimes it's the simple truth that the road has changed. The Mongols never expected the world to stay still. So their world was built to move. You arrive at a new site by midday. It's just a patch of grass, but within minutes, poles are in the ground. Felt is unrolled and lashed tight. A fire is crackling. And someone's already boiling tea. Like this is not a major operation. You help stake the new yurt in place. It creaks, settles, exhales warmth. It's not just shelter. It's a node, ready to catch the next rider, house the next scroll, feed the next empire-saving messenger. Your guide hands you a cup. You drink, watching the sky shift color. Historians marvel at the Mongols' mobility, often pointing to their armies. But the yam was just as agile, its stations ready to leap across terrain as fluidly as its riders. In this system, nothing was static. Everything moved. And when it moved together. You lie back on a mat that was on the other side of the empire this morning. You close your eyes and think. Home doesn't have to stay put. Sometimes, it rides with you. You're back on the road again, but something feels different. The trail's a little quieter. The air heavier. There's a kind of tension around the next bend. Not the kind that says wolves, but the kind that says rivals. Tonight, you ride through the part of the story where not everyone admired the Mongol brilliance. Because tonight, you're meeting the enemies who feared the postman. It sounds ridiculous at first. What army worries about the guy with the mailbag? But here's the thing, Mongol couriers weren't just mailmen. They were moving intelligence nodes, the first to see troop movement, the first to deliver commands, and sometimes the first to spread a story that made people panic before the army ever showed up. Some rival kingdoms saw the yam not just as infrastructure, but as espionage. And honestly, they weren't wrong. You stop at a station near the empire's western edge, where the architecture starts to change. The yurt is still there, but now there's a stone wall behind it. Extra guards. A bit less tea, and a lot more staring. You ask your guide why. Border zone, she says. The other side doesn't like how fast we talk to ourselves. In this area, sabotage was common. Rival powers tried to intercept scrolls, bribe couriers, burn relay stations, fake Pesa tokens to gain access or spread disinformation. There's even a story about a rival empire trying to replicate the yam, right down to the felt construction. It failed within months. Too expensive. Too many stolen horses. Not enough people who understood what it really meant to run a message, not just carry one. You hear of one courier who, realizing he was being followed by enemy scouts, rode into a ravine, buried the message under a cairn, and led the scouts away, then circled back a day later, recovered the scroll, and delivered it 2 days late but intact. He was promoted. The scouts? Never seen again. There are even rumors, which your guide won't confirm but doesn't deny, of couriers trained in combat, able to defend a message at sword point if necessary. It wasn't standard, but it wasn't unheard of. Enemies of the Mongol Empire came to fear not just the generals and cavalry, but the idea that the Khan could know something before they did. Before they'd even blinked, he'd sent a scroll. Before they'd spoken, he'd responded. Some historians say this was psychological warfare. Others call it logistical genius. You call it slightly terrifying. Your guide pulls out a pouch of dried plums. You snack in silence as she casually tells you about the time a rival courier tried to infiltrate the yam and was discovered because he mispronounced the name of a horse. Close, she says, but we don't forget our horses' names. You laugh. She doesn't. The point is made. As the sun sets, you pass a burned-out station. Just ash and broken wood. No sign of who did it. No record needed. But by dawn, another yurt will be up. Another rider will pass through. The message will keep moving. Because enemies might burn a road. But they can't stop the wind. And in the Mongol Empire, the message was always riding ahead of them. The air smells different here. Floral, earthy, and faintly spiced. You step off your horse and feel it instantly. The ground is softer, the pace is slower, and there are silk banners fluttering over wooden stalls just beyond the trees. You've arrived at a trading hub. And tonight, you're tracing the moment when the yam stopped being just a postal network and started becoming a highway for the world. Welcome to the edge of the Silk Road. Your guide tugs your sleeve and leads you toward a busy market where goods from a dozen languages jostle for space. Persian rugs, Chinese porcelain, Indian spices, Russian fur. It's loud, beautiful, and smells like 5 kinds of smoke and 7 kinds of ambition. But the real power behind all this, the messages that got here first. See, the Mongol Empire didn't just allow trade, it amplified it. Thanks to the yam, merchants could travel farther and faster than ever before, with guaranteed relay stops, fresh horses, and protection that made the idea of highway bandits a lot less appealing. You sit beneath an awning with a merchant from Samarkand. He tells you his journey took just 18 days, down from 40 the year before. Why? Because the postal route had expanded, and he could borrow the bones of the empire. You sip tea beside him, a mix of something floral and alarmingly bitter, and learn how the yam's relay points became more than message stops. Merchants rented supplies from stations. Translators set up camp at crossroads. Doctors and scribes started traveling with caravans. And messages didn't just carry war orders, they carried prices, market trends, even fashion updates from the other side of the world. Your guide shows you a coin from Venice, traded here for silks that had just arrived from China. Guess who carried the letter that started that deal? She asks. You guess. You're right. The yam didn't just bind the empire, it helped build a global market. And along the way, it created conversations that wouldn't have happened otherwise. There's a legend about a monk from Tibet who met a Persian astronomer at a relay station. They didn't speak the same language, but they shared dried fruit, sketched stars in the dust, and swapped stories until sunrise. Later, both wrote about it. One called it a meeting of winds. The other just said, I liked his boots. You laugh at that. But also, you get it. The postal system made room for more than just scrolls. It carried people into each other's worlds. Quietly, reliably, surprisingly warmly. By the time night falls, the traders are packing up. You help load a crate of dried dates into a cart heading west. There's a scroll tucked in the top. It's not addressed to a king, just a recipe for a cinnamon flatbread, written by a cook in Bokhara, delivered to a baker in Xi'an, by way of 3 horses and 1 amused courier. Because sometimes, what changed the world wasn't the message of war. It was the message that said, you have to try this. You wake up to silence. Not the peaceful kind, the unsettling kind. No hooves, no snoring riders, no clang of kettles or gossip near the yurt fire. Just absence. Your guide sits quietly nearby, sharpening a small knife, eyes fixed on the horizon like she's trying to see something that isn't there anymore. Tonight, you walk through a slower, quieter chapter. the fall of the system. Because even the yam, this brilliant, thunderous artery of the empire, had an end. You pack your saddle in silence, noticing the little things. The station's fence is broken. The last scroll was delivered 2 days ago, and no new riders have come. One horse is missing, ran off or stolen, no one's sure. Your guide finally speaks. The Khan is dead. Again. It's not the first time. The Mongol Empire had seen transitions. But this one, it feels different. You ride for hours without seeing another courier. The next station you reach has no tea, no firewood, and only 2 tired women sitting by a cold hearth. One is sewing. The other stares at her hands. They tell you the funding's been cut. No horses. No supplies. And, most damning of all, no trust. The yam didn't crumble all at once. It unraveled. First, the big routes lost riders, too expensive to maintain. Then, station masters stopped getting paid. Horses were taken for local militias. The Pesa tokens? Still shiny, but less respected. Governors began refusing to feed couriers unless the messages benefited them directly. Corruption crept in. Scrolls went missing. Bribes replaced urgency. And in some places, the road itself was forgotten. Historians argue over when exactly the yam died. Was it during the split of the Khanates? The civil wars? The rise of regional powers who no longer needed messages from distant capitals? Your guide shrugs. It died one hoof step at a time. You help rebuild part of a collapsed roof at the next station. No one's really staying here anymore, but an old man insists on keeping it upright, just in case. He used to ride. His hands are scarred, his eyes sharp. He shows you his pesa, tucked in a bundle of wool, like a relic. He doesn't say much. Just that when the road stopped breathing, he didn't know what to do with his feet. You sit beside him, watching the sun go down over a route that once pulsed with messages, now covered in grass and dust. And you understand something heavy. An empire doesn't fall in battle. It falls in silence. When people stop carrying the scroll. When yurts go empty. When the message no longer moves. You ride on through the night, hearing only your own horse. No hoofbeats behind you. No stations ahead. And yet, you carry the rhythm in your bones. Because systems may fall. But the memory of motion, that lingers. You've arrived at the last station. Or at least, what's left of it. The felt walls are gone, the poles stacked in a corner like firewood that never found its spark. A few footprints remain in the dust, half erased by wind. One horse stands tied to a post, chewing patiently on nothing. Tonight, you walk the edge of something ancient, quiet now, but echoing with everything that came before. Because this is where the story of the yam ends. And where something else, understanding, begins. Your guide sits on an overturned saddle frame, hands folded, posture still. She's not mourning. She's remembering. You ask if she misses it, the messengers, the scrolls, the rhythm. She smiles. It's not gone, she says. Just quiet. You sit beside her. For a while, there's no need to talk. The wind brushes your collar. The sun rests low. Somewhere nearby, a riderless horse stamps its feet like it remembers what it was built for. And you start to think back. You remember the relay runs. The morning stew. The silver pesa passed hand to hand like a sacred thread. You remember. The yurt that packed itself up in an hour. The goat that tried to eat your schedule. The scroll that traveled farther than most people ever would. You remember the movement. Not the speed. Not the urgency. But the pulse. A message passed, a horse ridden, a yurt prepared. And you realize. This wasn't just a postal system. It was a heartbeat. An empire's way of reminding itself it was alive. Historians write about roads and maps and distances. But you saw the people. The ones who stirred soup and stitched saddlebags. who knew the names of every horse, who could tell the hour by how the fire smoked through the roof. And maybe, just maybe, that's the real story. You rise slowly. The sun slips below the steppe, and the first star appears like a rider coming home. You reach into your pocket and find the old pesa you were gifted days ago. It's warm from your palm, heavy in a good way. You hang it on the post outside the abandoned yurt, not to leave it behind, but to mark where the message once was, where it still is. The air is still now, the fires are out, and the road is soft beneath your thoughts. You lie back, head resting on your saddlebag, the sky a wide hush above you. You can still feel it, the rhythm of hoofbeats, the whisper of scrolls sliding into pouches, the weight of quiet responsibility. But now, it's time to rest. Let the wind be your lullaby. Let the stars be your fellow riders. Let the path ahead fold gently into dreams. Because even the fastest couriers sleep. Even the busiest roads empty. And even the loudest empires grow silent in time. But you carry the story. In the tilt of your breath. In the pulse beneath your ribs. In the simple truth that motion, gentle, purposeful motion, has never truly ended. So drift now. Let your journey slow. Let the world fade like hoofprints in morning dew. You've traveled far enough for tonight.